Hello, gentlemen, and welcome to another Pallavi Market Research video. Today, we're going to be doing something a little bit differently. I'm going to be kind of just talking more off the cuff about what I think could be a nice series for this channel. And that is going to be touching on this idea of the meta skill sets. Now, the meta skill set I'm going to be describing in this video today is storytelling. And I want to first, before we get into that, describe what a meta skill set is and how I got to this idea of a meta skill set. So let's use Tom Brady as an example. So Tom Brady is a lot of his value to himself, his teammates, his coaches, to us as viewers of him, comes back around to this idea of intangible skills. So you can kind of think of meta skills as like high leverage intangible skills, qualitative skills. So versus a quantitative skill. So a quantitative skill being how far can I throw the football? How accurate can I be with it? Versus a qualitative skill is how good of a, guy am I in the locker room? How good of a leader am I? How good am I at seeing patterns in the defense so I can call an audible on the fly? And how familiar am I with my playbook so that I can, be even more observant on the field, blah, 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 and identify opportunities, right? So, building off of this idea of intangible skills, we, I believe, have are a category of skills called meta skills. So, again, in today's video, we're going to be discussing storytelling. And storytelling has increasingly become very, very apparent to me as one of, if not the most high leverage skill set there is. Because there, as you evolve as an entrepreneur, you need to lead others. And not only do you need to lead others, but you need to lead leaders eventually, right? Leading others, like leading, your typical like 9 to 5 employee in that demographic of person, right? Requires a certain skill set, but then leading a person who's a leader, right, where you're actually attracting real talent who can build teams beneath you is its own, it's like almost, it's like completely separate skill set. Okay. So I want to take a step back. I want to give you a little more background on me. So I studied political science in college. Okay. And the reason why I decided to study political science was because, when I was growing up, I was fortunate enough to like live in these wealthy areas. Like I grew up in like half of high school. I grew up in the same town where Ray Dalio runs his hedge fund in this random area in Wilton, Weston, Connecticut, right? And so I had all these hedge fund managers, like legendary hedge fund managers that lived like in and around me. And so I was able to kind of get to know some of these guys. And I would ask them like what degrees they thought would, make the most sense and like where would they recommend I go, right? And you'd think that they would say like finance and all these things, but they would actually tell me things like political science. And so I didn't really understand it at first, and that is what I ended up doing. I studied political science. But I only realized after the fact, or actually during it as well, why that was. And it's because it's actually a very ancient Greek kind of philosophy on the education. And so most people don't even understand what political science is, right? They're like, what is this a science? Like this isn't a science, right? And it's not a science in the way that we currently understand science. But you have to understand that the ancient Greeks actually defined science as an application of philosophy. Okay, that was the definition, right? But an application of philosophy, and the first application of philosophy, I should say, was politics. How do you organize human beings to do things, right? So, what skills does that unlock? What skills do you unlock when you study political science? It's actually essentially, you're basically just forced to read, write, and speak, right? Forced to write out your ideas. You're supposed to read other people's ideas, and you're forced to speak and expose your ideas to others. And that process of learning how to read, write, think, speak, is a phenomenal foundation for anyone to go and specialize into things later on. So this is actually really what the ancient Greeks taught people to do is they built this foundation, like a kind of what we would, maybe what you would describe as like a liberal arts kind of education, where you can ruthlessly, where you become well read, where you can write like a motherfucker, and you can speak like a motherfucker, and then with that foundation, you go and specialize in these different domains. You go and study math, you go and study science, you go and study biology, engineering. So I kind of took that approach, right? Where I built that kind of foundational skill set. And the main thing that I saw that was that has allowed me to succeed has to do with this idea of storytelling. Now, I'm going to read a little passage that I wrote in a book that I'm releasing pretty soon. Um, so here it is. This is just a little bit of a excerpt about, this is some character in the book talking about leadership and what it means to lead others in the context of business, right? So here it goes. Starts with, what I do is provide a vision for those who can't create one for themselves. I describe fiction to conjure things that will generate wealth and acclaim for all involved. To bridge an idea from fiction to reality, one must understand how to lead an idea. If someone describes an idea with excessive detail, it'll leave little room for people to feel that they can contribute to it, therefore failing to gain the requisite attention of those you seek to attract. Conversely, if an idea is too vague, people will fail to see where and how they can contribute to it. So, what do I mean by that? I mean that if you are describing a vision of the future, a possible business, a possible project, right? You need to be very cognizant of how you describe and pitch that story of what is possible, right? Of this potential, because you are describing something that is fiction, right? This does not exist. This is a potential future, right? So, in order to do that well, you need to describe it in such a way where they can see how they fit into that story, right? If you describe it in such excessive detail, and you make them feel that this has been totally thought out and that there's really no room for anyone to contribute to it, then you're basically building a wall between you and the person you're trying to get involved in what you're describing, right? And then on the other side, if you're too vague and you're too loose and it's not detailed enough, then they're not going to know how to contribute to it, even if they're interested in it, right? So you have to provide an optimized framework for plugging someone in, okay? So if I continue, leadership is therefore the ability to summon a vision of the future while maintaining the essential balance of the principal idea when persuading others of its precedence. Lagom is a Swedish word that describes this most closely, as it translates roughly to just the right amount. My intuition, the character in the book, for whatever reason, is more concerned with discovering the balance of ideas rather than how I can technically engineer the creation of it. It's just one of the many skills that allow individuals to transcend the traditional paths or the socioeconomic hierarchies of the day. A talent for pattern recognition matched with the ability to be aware of the right things at the right time while invoking a force of personality that allows one's fluid articulations to be heard is fundamentally what differentiates. So what do I mean by that? If you are describing things, right? If you're describing things in detail, but you lack that personality, right? You lack that charisma, right? That, or even more importantly, authenticity. Like if you intellectually believe that an idea will work, but you don't have any pathos connected to it. Pathos being like one of the three modes of persuasion, right? There's ethos, pathos, and logos. Those are the three modes of persuasion, if you don't know. Ethos appeals to credibility, pathos appeals to emotion, logos appeals to logic. If you are crafting an argument, a story, a persuasion, and you aren't tapping into all three of those elements, you're not going to get very far. And so, and if you're not being authentic, then you're not tapping into that pathos dimension. That's what I mean. So, that is what fundamentally differentiates, and not the specialization in any one skill. Specialization creates the illusion of creative expression, as their skill can only be contributed to the original vision of those paying your bills. You may play the saxophone or the violin better than anyone. At the end of the day, you will just become a part of someone else's composition. On this channel, we are crafting and helping you become composers. Okay, I'm not here to make the violinist the best violinist possible. We are interested in composition. Now, and to finish this off, that is why intangible skills will always be more valuable than tangible ones. Because ultimately, if you can't define or articulate what makes something valuable, you can't replace or replicate it. What inspires leads, and only truly rare abilities inspire. Now, let me read that last part again. What inspires leads, and only truly rare abilities inspire. We want to authentically develop these skills, guys. These skills that I'm, kind of touching on. Meta skill sets. And in today's video, we discuss storytelling, and I'm going to, continue to unpack more when I think of them. I have a few others definitely in the back of my head, but really, there's no rush on developing these ideas. So that's today's video. I hope you learned something, and try to meditate on this idea of how can I tell more effective and persuasive stories, because that's really like a Steve Jobs is doing. Steve Jobs and Elon Musk, these leaders are good, are really, at times exceptional operators and executors and generals, right? But they can't get very far without telling persuasive stories, right? And essentially presenting their ideas that I was touching on earlier appeal to ethos, pathos, logos, right? It needs to be a logical story. It needs to appeal to your emotions, and you need to obviously be credible, right? You need to have credibility when telling those stories. You need to have a track record, right? But, you can get pretty far by just having 2 out of the 3 also if you're just starting out. All right? That's today's video. Gentlemen, have a great rest of your weekend, and we'll pick this up tomorrow.